Welcome to Warbonnet Trains. Today we are ballasting the HO layout.
These are the materials we're going to need to do this job. 70% isopropyl rubbing alcohol, and you're looking for the cheapest stuff on the shelf. Next item is a 50-50 mix of PVA glue, which is like Elmer's glue, and water. No soap, just plain. The next item is a 50-50 mix of alcohol and water. The next item is ballast itself, and since this is HO, we can use either fine or medium ballast, and in this case we're using medium. From the left again in the front, we're going to use a 3/4 inch paintbrush, a small paintbrush, a small cosmetic brush. We sharpened the end of it down to a point. Bottles of paint, and we're going to use the more tannish color for the ties and the rust color for the rails. A small container to be able to dispense the ballast onto the track, and a bright boy type item to clean the tops of the rails when we're all finished. Okay, let's get to prepping the rails. Okay, in this phase what we're going to be using is the Vallejo paint and the paintbrush. You can use any brand of acrylic paint in this phase. I just prefer to use a Vallejo, and that's what I hand on hand. The color I'm going to use is a more natural wood because I'm modeling the 1870 to 1890 era, and most of the ties were pretty much just raw wood sawn from local lumber. So they won't have that dark grayish black look like they normally do. So what we're doing is we're just coating the tops of the ties. You don't have to be real thorough and get the sides or anything, just the tops, because that's all you'll be able to see when the ballasting is done. Okay, don't worry about getting paint on the top of the rails, because when we're finished with the entire process, we're going to clean the rails off with the bright boy at the end of the process. Okay, now we get to the ballasting itself. What we're doing is we're taking our smaller container and we're going to fill it up with ballast. And this is what we're going to use to dispense our ballast onto the track. This gives us a little more control as to where the ballast grains are going to go. What we're doing is, what our goal is to get the ballast between the ties. And what I mean by this is we don't want the ballast piled up on top of the ties. One is going to interfere with the running of our trains. Our train wheels are actually going to hit the ballast and cause a derailment. So we want to be very sure that we keep the ties clean, the top of the ties. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our brush. Now I'm going to use the stiff brush, actually. Picked the wrong one. There you go. We're going to take the stiff brush and we're going to pack it between the ties. And we're going to spread it out. We don't want too much ballast on the top, so we're going to spread it out until it all ends up between them. For the sides, we're going to make sure that we have all the ballast piled up, from the edges. We're going to clean it up on the edges and get a nice pile with a good, I say 45 degree, but with a nice appealing angle. It's pretty much going to fall naturally to where it wants to fall. But what we're doing is we're just making sure the edges are nice and clean. Once we're all done with this, we're going to tap the rail, and what the tapping does is going to pack the ballast between the ties. Okay, you're going to want to work approximately 2 to 3 foot sections at a time. You really don't want to go any larger than this, for the only reason that you might accidentally disrupt your piles and have to rework them again. Okay, before we get to gluing, this is the look we're going for. Number one, there are no pebbles on top of the ties. This is the goal. The reason why is you can see the sides of the rails. There are no pebbles on the sides of the rails that the wheels are going to hit. Now, once they're glued, these things are hard. They are rock solid fast on the rail, and the weight of the train will not be able to knock them loose. So it's going, the ballast, if they're stuck to the side of the rails, is going to lift the train up out of the track and cause a derailment. So this is one of the reasons why we do this. The other reason is this is what the prototype really looks like. Walk down the tracks if you ever get close there, and just get up near them. Don't get up on the middle of them. That's kind of dangerous. But look at the tops of the ties. There are few to no rocks on top of them. They do this on purpose. Okay? So once you look like this, then we're ready to continue. Okay, now we're getting ready to commit. We're going to get to gluing the ballast. What I'm doing here is I'm checking where I left off last time so I don't go past gluing what I don't need to. Then we're going to take the alcohol and we're going to spritz the ballast. Now we're looking to just make the surface wet. It doesn't have to permeate all the way through. The goal of this is just to get the ballast to start soaking into it, and once it starts at the surface, capillary action will do the rest of the job. Just keep in mind, this is alcohol and water, a 50-50 mix. You don't need anything else. Okay, you notice I got a switch nearby. I will tell you now that I don't have any electronics underneath. If you did, you're going to want to cover this up with some blue painter's tape or something else, just to make sure that you don't get any moisture down inside the switch machine if there's one under there. Okay, once you're done spraying, immediately right after, while it's still wet, start applying the glue. And notice I put a generous amount. You want this to soak all the way through. Do a small amount at a time. Notice I'm just putting a small line. We don't want it to start washing down the side before it soaks in. Okay, and you want to get all sides. Notice I started in the center, then I did the outside, now I'm going to the inside. As I go, I check it again just to make sure that I've put enough glue. If you don't notice that it's soaked all the way through, just put a little bit more. And again, we don't want any puddling down at the bottom or any landslides. If you put too much liquid, just like the real world, if the ground holds too much liquid, it's going to start a washout. It's going to start sliding down and take the ballast with it. Okay, once you're done with this spot, you don't want to touch it. The reason why is the glue, when it's mixed, actually dries fairly quickly. The surface of it is going to get real sticky. It doesn't matter what you touch it with, it is going to stick to it. So at this point, if you have a washout or if you got a spot that's not quite covered, just leave it alone. Go ahead and let it completely dry. Come back to it and either chunk it out and redo it, or just apply a little more ballast and go through the re-gluing process again. Okay, that's pretty much it for this phase. Okay, now we're going to get up to rusting up the rails. Before we start, we want to make sure that the ballast is completely dry. You want to at least wait 12 hours if you're indoors. If you're outside in a high humidity area, such as a garage or outside in a shed that's not climate controlled with an air conditioner, wait at least a solid 3 days. The drying process not only has to dry on the surface, but it has to dry the whole pile. It's pretty thick, so it's going to take a little while to do. If you touch it and it doesn't feel solid, and what I mean by that is if it feels a little spongy, it's not fully dry yet. You don't want to mess with it until it's solid hard. Okay, after this point, and again, I use the Vallejo paint, and again, any acrylic paint will work good for this phase. I chose a rust color. It's more brown than red. If you see in the picture, this is really wet. It turns a more deeper brownish color when it's dry. But I just used a small fan type brush and used the glue thinned with just a little bit of thinner. I used alcohol to thin the paint. and drew the brush right alongside the rail. This is a little technique that takes a little practice, because you not only want to get the side of the rail, but you also want to get paint on top of the nail head. And since it'll be fairly thin, if you just brush the top of the nail head, then the paint will spread by itself to the tie plate, and we'll put a nice little rust color to it. And that's what you're looking for. And that'll be it for this phase. Once you're all done with this phase, you just let it all dry, and then you'll be finished. Okay, here we are completed. Notice, take a look just under the rail, how the paint actually soaks into the underside of the rail just a little bit, giving it a little rust color. This is a great effect. I like the way this happens. The reason why is when it rains, the rails rust up. Where does it go? It drips right below it. If you look at the real tracks, you can see this effect. The rust color actually gets on the rocks and the pebbles themselves, so you got this little bit of rust aura on the rocks themselves. Okay, and you can see here, this second picture, it's a little bit, it's more dry. You can see how it's more turning a brownish color than the reddish color when it's wet. That's the effect you want. I like it. Okay, and this concludes the tutorial. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget, if you like it, give me a thumbs up. If you like videos like this, please subscribe. Y'all have a good one.